Hi, welcome to week 3. We're talking about breaking some bad habits today, and Lord help us, because we're going to need it. This week's devotional is called I Can Will It, but I Can't Do It. Yes, you can. The yes, you can's not in my actual title, but I'm just letting you know. Yes, you can. With God, all things are possible. Okay, so let's get started. The verse I'm using for this devotional is Hebrews 12:11. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. When I'm struggling to get my stuff together, it's a sign I'm lacking discipline. If I'm lacking discipline, it's often because I've developed negative habits. Now, there are several authors who go in depth about habits, how they form in the brain, making them so hard to stop. Atomic Habits is a phenomenal book. But I love Dr. Carolyn Leaf. Her books are phenomenal. They're based in scripture. And I highly recommend her books for anyone struggling to break destructive mental habits, thoughts, or patterns. But we don't have to wait to pick up one of those books, okay? We can get started right now. So indulge me while I try to break down the deeply complex topic of habits into a pint-sized devo that you can chew on. So a bad habit, at least that's how I'm defining it for our purposes, is an unhealthy coping mechanism to deal with fear, worry, and anxiety. When we feel the discomfort and pain, we'll default to a particular vice that gives us temporary relief, even if that vice may cause us permanent suffering down the road. Our brains have an amazing adaptive quality called neuroplasticity. Your brain forms neuronal connections based on what you do repeatedly in your life, both good and bad. When we do the same unhealthy coping mechanism over and over, our brain makes a connection. When she's stressed, eat sugar. When she's worried, bite your nails. When she has anxiety, pour a huge glass of wine. When she feels inadequate, start gossiping. And once we're triggered, our brain will have us do that thing without us barely even noticing. Sometimes we don't even notice at all. So do you catch my drift of where I'm going here? Our brains are so efficient. Most of the time, we aren't even aware it's happening, okay? So remember the first time you backed out of a driveway when you were learning to drive, okay? You were checking all the mirrors, looking over your shoulder. You were like hitting the gas, then slamming on the brake. And you were so worried that you were going to hit something because it's harder to see going backwards than it is forwards, okay? But after you did it over and over, your brain, in an effort to not overload you, became extremely efficient and helped you back out to the point where now you're backing out and you're barely even thinking about it, okay? Have you ever got home from work like, how did I get here, okay? Your subconscious drove you home. Your subconscious knew the way home. It knew to stop at lights. It knew to speed up or slow down based on the car in front of you. It drove you home while your brain is actually thinking about, a vacation in the Bahamas with Mai Tais. That's amazing stuff. That is neuroplasticity. And thanks to neuroplasticity, we can get home. But if it works to our disadvantage with bad habits, then I guess it gets us home. But we also can't get our crap together, okay? So how do we stop a bad habit? It starts with the renewal of your mind. Remember Romans 12:2 at the beginning of our series. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So we talked about renewal in the beginning of our series, and it's worth revisiting again and again and again. The renewal of your mind is a conscious choice to see things differently through God's lens of an unconditional love, our belief and faith in His love and provision, and not through the lens of fear. As a result, we begin to behave differently. Our repetitive actions lead to our brain creating new habits and behaviors that lead us to joy and bring us life rather than habits that inevitably bring us shame, sadness, and depression. As a result, you raise your standards in various areas of your life so you can live a life of joy, excellence, freedom, and integrity, rather than a life enslaved to bad habits and low standards. Because of the military, my husband had a habit of being somewhere early, not on time, early. That was his standard. You could not get that man to lower his standard. If I was running late, he'd go without me. I had a lower standard and I was late all of the time. I need to raise my standard, okay? Because being late all the time is rude. I digress. So for this to be your reality, you have to actively and consistently commit to replacing dysfunctional, destructive habits for functional, life-giving habits. We do this to experience God's gifts and blessings to the full, to share our gifts and blessings with others. So in other words, getting our stuff together should be our highest priority. And friend, we better not mess around. So how do we create a new life-giving habit? With a new life-giving vision. All of our bad habits are doing something for us or we wouldn't do them. They're meeting some kind of internal need. We have to get to the root of that need and make sure it's met the right way. So let me give you a recent example that's really helped me. I've shared before that I often feel overwhelmed with work and motherhood. And honestly, who doesn't, okay? And I worried a lot about things that I couldn't control. So to remedy and squelch those negative feelings, I began to bake treats. Now, nothing's wrong with baking. Baking is a joyous creative outlet. But if your other dysfunctional coping mechanism is to binge on carbs when you're stressed, I was essentially creating a bad habit that fed directly into my other bad habit. So once my pajama pants got tight, I went into crisis mode. I knew I needed a new vision, and quickly, because tight pajama pants are rock bottom. Tell me I'm lying. Tight pajama pants, rock bottom. You know it, and I know it, okay? So after some prayer and some contemplation, I felt a desire to create a garden. Now, when I feel overwhelmed or like I need more time for myself to recharge, guess what? Instead of baking and eating half a batch of cookie dough, I go out into my garden. So I'm about to sound corny here, and I make no apologies, but I feel so at peace when I'm in nature. And the joy and the contentment I get tending and growing my vegetables far surpasses the bloating or the shame or the regret or that horrible zingy crash from too much sugar, right? When I have and binge on desserts. So studies have shown even that gardening has massive emotional and psychological benefits, and I'd add endless spiritual benefits. I don't think that that's a coincidence that God gave us this draw and this contentedness when we're in nature, okay? And I feel so close and in awe of God when I'm working my hands in the soil. So when I felt that negative, overwhelmed feeling of stress from just life, I made a choice to put on my shoes and check on my garden. And I've done it now so often, the minute that I'm triggered, I just head out. I even long for it. But let's be real, is it the garden I'm longing for? Or am I really longing for God? This has been so vital for me, creating a new vision that feels so peaceful, so good, so dreamy. I get excited to replace it with any bad habit I'm currently using to meet my need. I really have to lean on God constantly to get started, but once I get into a rhythm and I'm so handsomely rewarded, my new vision eventually becomes a new habit. Of course, life will throw us a curveball. That's what it does. But even if we get off course, we'll now know the way home. My standard for my life must rise to God's best if I want God's best for my life. So here's where to start. Figure out what need, want, pain, discomfort that bad habit is temporarily relieving. Then dream up a new vision that meets that same need or relieves that same discomfort, but in a good, healthy, life-giving way. Ask God for help, for a vision, for the fruit of the Spirit, for self-control. Ask God for a miracle. Then act out your new vision every time you're triggered consistently until your brain makes your vision a habit. A new habit will naturally become an unshakable, higher standard. It really is that simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. So here's your challenge for this week. Identify any dysfunctional habits or coping mechanisms that are preventing you from getting it together. Then begin to replace your new visions with your old habits. It'll be hard. You'll need God's help. Speak to Him, go to Him, depend on Him, trust Him. Then lay your brick. I'll see you next week.